Presidente.
Bonjour. Buongiorno, cari colleghe e cari colleghi, la seduta è riaperta. In relazione alla decisione della Commissione Regi di avviare negoziati interistituzionali a norma dell'articolo 71, paragrafo 1 del regolamento, annunciata l'apertura della sessione di lunedì, non ho ricevuto richiesta di votazione in Parlamento da parte di un numero di deputati o gruppi politici, quindi la Commissione può avviare i negoziati.
Has been now negotiated, that particular issue.
Procedo alla comunicazione dei risultati del secondo turno di votazione di ieri, martedì 8 giugno. Accordi provvisori, certificato digitale, approvato. Emendamento 27 approvato. Emendamento 2 approvato. Emendamento 3 approvato. Relazione Ramos sull'Assemblea Generale dell'ONU, prima parte approvato, seconda parte approvato, prima parte approvato, seconda parte approvato, terza parte approvato, quarta parte approvato, prima parte approvato, seconda parte approvato, terza parte approvato, prima parte approvato, seconda parte approvato, terza parte approvato, quarta parte approvato, prima parte approvato, seconda parte approvato, prima parte approvato. Paragrafo 1, punto AGEI, prima parte approvato, seconda parte approvato, terza parte approvato, quarta parte approvato, quinta parte approvato, sesta parte approvato, settima parte approvato, paragrafo 1, punto AL, prima parte approvato, seconda parte approvato, considerando E, prima parte approvato, seconda parte approvato. Votazioni finali, relazione Van Overveld sulla politica di concorrenza, approvato, relazione onorevole Vana, dimensioni di genere della politica di coesione, approvato, relazione dell'onorevole Luena sulla strategia dell'UE sulla biodiversità 2030, approvato. Grazie. E adesso passiamo alle discussioni. L'ordine del giorno reca le dichiarazioni del Consiglio europeo e della Commissione, conclusioni della riunione straordinaria del Consiglio europeo del 24 e 25 maggio. Ricordo agli onorevoli deputati che tutte le discussioni di questa tornata non è previsto il catch the eye nel cartellino blu, inoltre non è avvenuto, come è avvenuto nelle ultime tornate, sono previsti interventi a distanza dagli uffici di collegamento nazionali del Parlamento europeo. Do il benvenuto alla Presidente della Commissione von der Leyen e al Presidente Charles Michel, a cui do la parola per cominciare il nostro dibattito sulle conclusioni della riunione straordinaria del Consiglio. Prego, Presidente.
About the conclusions of the special meeting of the European Council on 24th and 25th of May 2021. Thank you very much.
Monsieur le Président du Parlement européen, Madame la Présidente de la Commission, chers collègues membres du Parlement européen, ladies and gentlemen, hijacking a plane is piracy. With 171 passengers on board, it's kidnapping. When these acts are carried out by a state, it's hostage-taking and state piracy. For what? To get hold of a young journalist and his partner whose free speech is intolerable for Mr. Lukashenko. We had to react quickly and strongly, and we did. We quickly agreed to adopt sanctions against the Belarusian regime commensurate with the gravity of the event. And these include additional individual sanctions, targeted economic measures, and a ban on Belarusian airlines. We also called on European airlines to avoid Belarusian airspace, a recommendation that was immediately followed. In the wake of this decision, the UK and the US took similar measures, and I would like to emphasise three clear messages. The first is for Roman Protasevich and all political prisoners. The EU will not rest until you are released. The second is for Mr. Lukashenko. Mr. Protasevich must be released immediately. Until that, we hold you responsible for his physical and mental health. And our third message is to the Belarusian people, and especially to those fighting for democracy, freedom of expression, and media freedom. The EU stands by you and will continue our direct support for your struggle to choose your destiny. Dear colleagues, as we did last year on China, we had a strategic debate on our relationship with Russia, and we were unanimous in condemning Russia's illegal, provocative and disruptive activities. But above all, we have given ourselves time for a high-quality debate. And I would like to explain the method, the objectives, and the first resolutions. First, the method. The relationship between the EU and Russia is complex, and every complex and strategic choice must begin with building our collective intelligence. This takes time, but in the long run, it saves time. Once we share a common analysis, it's easier to take a collective decision. We are then stronger because we are more united. And during our strategic discussion, the leaders shared their views and experience with Russia without reservation. Russia has created a string of conflicts in its neighborhood and beyond, and facing that, we have often reacted rather than acted proactively. Rather than reacting to what we do not want, we must first decide what we do want from Russia. We need to better define our strategic objectives and how best to achieve them. And this must be done in accordance with the 5 guiding principles we have already agreed. They remain as valid as ever. Implementation of the Minsk agreements, strengthen relations with the Eastern partners, strengthening the Union's resilience, selective cooperation with Russia on issues of interest to the Union, and the need for people-to-people contacts and support for Russian civil society. We will continue this work at our next meeting based on a report we have requested from the Commission and the High Representative. And this report should contain concrete options or scenarios. Monsieur le Président, Madame la Présidente, chers collègues, nous avons aussi eu l'occasion à nouveau d'adresser la crise sanitaire, cette pandémie qui nous frappe. Et je résumerai le sentiment autour de la table du Conseil européen de la manière suivante. C'est un optimisme prudent qui nous habite. D'une part, nous voyons bien que nous avons réussi à augmenter la capacité de production de vaccins et la délivrance de vaccins. C'est un pas dans la bonne direction. D'autre part, nous comprenons qu'il faut rester vigilant et suivre la situation, notamment en lien avec le risque de mutants et de variants. Des progrès ont également été réalisés en lien avec le certificat Covid. Nous avons salué les accords qui ont été enregistrés, notamment avec le Parlement européen sur le sujet. Nous allons continuer à travailler, à faire en sorte que l'on puisse progressivement restaurer la libre circulation des personnes avec une attention particulière pour les impacts économiques qui sont liés notamment dans certains pays qui sont directement concernés par le secteur touristique. Optimisme prudent, c'est évidemment le sentiment largement partagé autour de la table. Il y a un autre point qui a été longuement abordé durant ce Conseil européen, c'est l'engagement international de l'Union européenne. C'est du bon sens, nous savons que nous ne serons pas en sécurité quand le monde entier ne sera pas en sécurité face à cette crise. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous sommes totalement convaincus que l'Union européenne ne doit pas rougir des choix qui ont été opérés depuis le début. C'est l'Union européenne, sur le plan international, qui, en premier lieu, a décidé de mobiliser des moyens pour la recherche de façon massive et sans précédent pour réussir en moins d'1 an à produire des vaccins. C'est l'Union européenne qui a fait le choix de maintenir des exportations de vaccins et en moyenne c'est 50% des vaccins produits sur le sol européen qui ont été exportés. Et vous vous souvenez que nous avons parfois été critiqués par certains
implemented. And you know that we've at times been criticised by citizens and other sectors who said that we were slow to move on vaccines. But the European Union was in fact at the root of the COVAX initiative to ensure that there was financial solidarity for other countries to order vaccines.
Avec un engagement très fort marqué par la Commission
européenne, c'est augmenter
les capacités de production, augmenter les capacités de résilience, y compris dans le cadre de partenariats concrets, spécialement avec le continent africain, particulièrement avec certains pays qui sont engagés sur le continent africain. Et je n'oublie pas l'importance de prendre en compte aussi l'Amérique latine, qui est aussi une région pour laquelle il est important de travailler sur des capacités pharmaceutiques plus fortes à moyen terme et à long terme. Ça inclut, bien sûr, des débats en lien avec la propriété intellectuelle, mais aussi des débats en lien avec les transferts de know-how et les transferts de technologie. Nous allons continuer à être engagés sur ce sujet qui est évidemment un sujet important. Nous avons aussi eu l'occasion d'aborder la question du climat. Et vous vous souviendrez qu'après cette décision forte qui a été prise il y a 18 mois, la neutralité climat en 2050, we've been working on our climate diplomacy to try and convince other partners to show strong ambition when it comes to the climate. That decision was made 18 months ago, and we also made the decision to bolster our ambitions in light of Agenda 2030. And there's a further shared feeling here around how we can achieve our ambitious goals. And that is why the European Council decided to hold an intense discussion on the climate in order to raise awareness in the European Commission with regards to the differing viewpoints, the different starting points and concerns around these ambitious climate targets. So we very much trust that the European Commission will be putting forward initiatives in the short term that will be dealt with in a legislative framework. Le Conseil européen reviendra sur le débat politique en lien avec cette ambition de progresser afin de refaire reculer cette menace climatique. Nous avons aussi eu l'occasion d'aborder brièvement, et pour la première fois depuis le Brexit, la relation entre l'Union européenne et le Royaume-Uni. Et je voudrais résumer en quelques mots le sentiment et la position exprimée par le Conseil européen. Nous croyons profondément à l'état de droit. Pacta sunt servanda. Quand des accords sont conclus, ils doivent être mis en œuvre de bonne foi. Et le message est l'expression d'une force tranquille européenne. Nous souhaitons être un partenaire loyal, engagé, une relation positive, fructueuse, constructive avec le Royaume-Uni. C'est le souhait qui nous a toujours habité tout au long de cette négociation, au cours de laquelle on était capable de démontrer notre ferme unité. Nous sommes aussi prêts à utiliser les différents moyens à notre disposition pour protéger nos intérêts, pour garantir l'intégrité du marché intérieur, pour faire en sorte que les accords soient respectés et pour protéger aussi bien sûr le Good Friday Agreement. Et nous avons répété notre solidarité vis-à-vis de l'Irlande. Enfin, si vous me permettez quelques instants, et je ne veux pas abuser du temps de parole, Monsieur le Président, je sais que vous aurez tout à l'heure un débat sur le G7, les sommets internationaux, et je voudrais en quelques mots tracer les perspectives pour ces réunions dans les prochains jours. Il y a, à mon avis, un paradoxe auquel nous avons été confrontés les derniers mois. D'une part, le monde a été pratiquement mis à l'arrêt sur le plan économique, sur le plan de nos capacités de mobilité. Mais dans le même temps, cette pandémie a montré avec une force rarement atteinte l'importance de la coopération internationale. Et nous avons observé ces derniers mois un renforcement des dynamiques de coopération internationale. Cet engagement multilatéral, c'est en fait l'ADN de ce projet européen. Ce sera encore le cas dans les prochains jours et les prochaines semaines avec cette activité intense. 3 points me semblent importants dans le cadre de la réunion G7, dans le cadre du sommet avec le Canada ou encore avec les États-Unis la semaine prochaine. Le premier point, nos valeurs fondamentales. Nous le voyons bien, on en débat aujourd'hui, vous en débattez régulièrement dans cette Assemblée. Nos modèles de société libérale sont mis sous pression. Il y a des tentatives permanente et décuplée ces dernières années de tenter de démontrer la fragilité, la faiblesse, l'inefficacité de ce modèle de démocratie libérale qui pourtant a démontré dans l'histoire sa capacité de donner de la liberté, de donner de l'innovation, de donner de la capacité de prospérité. Et nous devons, comme je le disais pour la Russie, pas simplement subir les chocs, les attaques et les coups porté
And
par
it's not
ceux qui
just
n'aiment
about
pas ce
having to
modèle fondé
withstand
sur la
the
liberté,
blows to this model from
l'émancipation,
those such
la
as Russia
non-discrimination. Nous devons
who
porter avec plus
do not
d'engagement,
like
de manière
this
plus
model.
stratégique, plus
It's about
proactive
strengthening our
cette
commitment,
promotion
being
de nos
more
valeurs de liberté,
proactive
de
and
démocratie. Et ces
strengthening the
points seront
way
évidemment
that
au
we
cœur de ces réunions
protect
internationales.
our
Il y a un deuxième point
principles and
qui me paraît
values.
important, c'est la
That's an important
prospérité.
point.
Comment peut-on
There's a
améliorer
second
les
point that's
conditions
very
de vie?
important
C'est
as
le
well.
débat sur les
Prosperity.
transitions
How
climatiques,
can we improve
digitales. C'est le
living
débat sur la
conditions?
fiscalité
And this ties
internationale.
into
Et
digital,
l'Union
to
européenne a
climate
été
change,
à
to
l'avant-garde
global
de ces
tax
sujets-là.
reform. And the
C'est l'Union
EU has
européenne,
been
souvent
at
le
the
Parlement
forefront
européen
of
d'ailleurs,
these
qui a mis à
subjects.
l'agenda
Quite often, in
international,
fact, it's the
d'abord
European
européen et puis
Parliament that
international,
placed these
cette
subjects
question
at the heart of the
d'équité dans les
international
échanges
agenda.
économiques, dans les échanges
It's
commerciaux,
about
dans
fairness,
la question de la
equity when it comes
fiscalité
to trade
internationale.
relations
Ce
and,
thème
once again, global
progresse, on
tax
le voit,
systems.
avec
And we're
un
making
premier pas
progress in this
au
area.
travers de cette réunion ministérielle
That's something that
dans le
we
cadre du G7 et la capacité de
see
faire progresser un certain
within
nombre
the
d'idées pour
ministerial
amener
meeting
plus
of the
d'équité
G7
dans la
to bring
fiscalité
more
des
fairness
entreprises sur le
to
plan international. Et le
tax
troisième
regimes for
point, c'est
companies
bien
on the world
sûr
stage.
la sécurité, la
Thirdly,
stabilité. Comment
safety and
peut-on
security,
travailler pour
as well as stability.
prévenir les
How
conflits,
can we
réduire
work to
les risques de
prevent
conflits,
conflicts,
anticiper les
to
risques
reduce
d'escalade?
existing
Comment peut-on
conflicts,
tenter
to
un
stop conflicts
conflit,
from
coopérer
escalating?
pour
How
tenter de
can we
résoudre les
cooperate when there is a
difficultés et
clash
tenter
to
de
try and
dégager des
resolve
solutions
issues
durables?
that
Et nous
arise
connaissons
and
les
try and
différents
find
foyers dans
lasting
le monde
solutions?
pour lesquels nous, Union européenne,
We can all
avons
think of
intérêt
different
à
places
ramener
around
la
the world where
stabilité
it's
et à
in the EU's
coopérer
interest
avec
to
nos
ensure that there is
partenaires afin de
stability and
pouvoir
in our
rencontrer des
interest to
résultats.
cooperate with our
Voilà,
partners
Monsieur
in
le
order to
Président, Madame la
achieve
Présidente,
good
Mesdames et Messieurs les
results.
parlementaires, les
President of
quelques
the
messages
Parliament,
que
of
je
the
souhaitais
Commission, honourable members,
partager avec
this
avec
is
vous.
what
Et
I
je
wanted to
suis
share with
bien
you here
sûr
this morning. And
dans
of
l'attente de
course,
vos réactions, de vos
I'm
remarques,
very much looking
d'observations
forward to
et prêt
hearing your comments
à
and
réagir
remarks
ensuite. Merci
and
de
ready
votre
to respond to
attention.
any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Grazie Presidente Michel, adesso la parola alla Presidente von der Leyen.
And
Prego.
now the floor goes to President of the Commission, Madam von der Leyen. You have the floor, please, Madam.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident Sassoli, lieber Präsident Michel, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren Abgeordnete. Wir haben gestern ja gemeinsam hier im Europäischen Parlament darüber diskutiert, wie wir Next Generation EU, Next Generation stärker aus der Krise in Europa kommen können. Heute möchte ich Ihnen einen Überblick geben über die nächsten Schritte, die wir global gehen, um diese Krise endlich hinter uns zu lassen. Dabei möchte ich Sie insbesondere über Ergebnisse informieren. Zunächst einmal die Ergebnisse unseres G20-Gesundheitsgipfels in Rom und dann natürlich der EU-Sondergipfel einige Tage später. Und ich möchte über die Initiativen sprechen, die wir mit unseren Freunden beim G7-Gipfel Ende der Woche in Cornwall planen und dann auch nächsten Dienstag, wenn Charles Michel und ich den amerikanischen Präsidenten Joe Biden zum Gipfel in Brüssel empfangen. Diese Treffen unterstreichen nicht nur den multilateralen Ansatz, den wir immer in der Krise durchgehalten haben. Das war nicht einfach, aber wir haben ihn durchgehalten. Aber diese Treffen sind natürlich auch eine sehr, sehr gute Gelegenheit, um zu zeigen, dass unser transatlantisches Bündnis erneuert ist, dass es stark ist und dass es gut ist für die Menschen sowohl in den USA als auch in Europa. Our immediate focus is, of course, in all these meetings on beating COVID-19 everywhere and ending the pandemic and, of course, rebuilding our economies. And the dominant topic in all these sessions we had together, the meetings and summits, but also those who are ahead of us, is vaccines and the equal and fair access to vaccines globally. This is why Mario Draghi and I convened the G20 Global Health Summit. It was, on one hand, the lessons learned, but on the other hand, also concrete pledges. And in their Rome Declaration, the leaders gave a very strong signal. They had three main points in the G20 Rome Declaration. First of all, they committed to boosting production capacity in low and middle income countries, and I come back to that later. Then, of course, the second topic, tackling those bottlenecks in the supply chains. So if you look at the Rome Declaration, you see it's a plaidoyer for seamless flows of vaccines and components. We know that we're not there yet, but the Rome Declaration was the very first time that there was this commitment towards that. And we committed in investing in a global surveillance and early warning system, knowing that we failed on that at the beginning of the pandemic. But as I've said, in the short term, the dominant topic is vaccine supply in low and middle income countries. And there are three strands we follow up. The first one is indeed COVAX. It's good that we have COVAX. As Charles Michel said, it was the European Union who was one of the main founder of COVAX. Up to today, up to 3 billion euros have been invested in COVAX pledged to COVAX by Team Europe so far. But at the moment, being in COVAX, not so much the money is the problem, it's more the access to vaccines in kind. And therefore, on top, Team Europe pledged to donate at least 100 million doses of vaccines by the end of the year. The second strand is I'm convinced we have to engage the private sector more in that topic. And at the Health Summit, we worked with our industrial partners, and it was good to see that the industrial partners committed publicly that they are willing to deliver 1.3 billion doses of vaccines till the end of the year to low and middle income countries, at non-profit to low income countries, and at low costs to middle income countries. So it's good to see that public announcement. We can keep track and we can make sure with all the scrutiny that there is 1.3 billion doses delivered in these circumstances till the end of the year. And indeed, the third pillar is export of vaccines. We cannot just keep the whole production for ourselves. And Europe has proven that it is possible. It is possible to vaccinate your own people and to allow for export. Since January, we have been exporting almost half of our production. And if you transfer that in numbers, out of 600 million doses of vaccines produced here in Europe, until now, round about 300 million doses have been exported to over 90 countries. And honourable members, if all the other vaccine producers had followed our example, the world would be a different place today. And in the course of this discussion, of course, the question of the TRIPS agreement has been raised recently. When the US administration put forward their thoughts, we said we are open for discussions. Now, just 4 weeks later, we have put forward a new global trade initiative at the WTO, aiming to deliver more equitable access to vaccines and therapeutics. And this initiative has 3 elements. The first is we want clear rules to keep supply chains open and to eliminate export restrictions for vaccines, and of course also for all the components that are necessary to produce these vaccines. So clear rules in WTO to put disciplines if there are export obstacles. Secondly, we want to help ramp up production, not only in Europe, but also in Africa or elsewhere where needed. And for that, we need to ensure also in WTO clear rules to ensure the necessary transfer of technologies and know-how in emergencies. And here I want to be very clear. I think intellectual property has to be protected because it is the idea behind the breakthrough, and it retains the incentives for innovation in research and development. And of course, voluntary licenses are the most effective way to facilitate expanding production. And at the G20 Global Health Summit in Rome, leaders reaffirmed this assessment. However, and that's the big however, in a global emergency like this pandemic, if voluntary licensing fails, compulsory licensing has to be and is the legitimate tool to scale up production. And this is why, together with WTO, we want to clarify and simplify the use of compulsory licensing in times of national emergency. And we have discussed this proposal yesterday in the WTO. Vaccine production requires, of course, a lot of know-how. We all know that. So these are very complicated biological processes. They require know-how, they require technology, they require skilled personnel, and, of course, infrastructure. And I think it is not by simply waiving intellectual property rights that you get there. It is actually by collaboration and, if need be, compulsory licensing that you enhance technology transfer. because the patent is not telling the whole story. A patent is explaining part of the production process, and get me right, it should not stand in the way. So there are also provisions for that in our proposal in WTO. But you need to have more when it comes to these kinds of complex products. And this is why Europe started this initiative in WTO, to simplify compulsory licensing. And this is also why Europe committed €1 billion to create, with our African partners and our industrial partners, so all three, manufacturing hubs in different regions in Africa, and at a certain point in time we'll certainly come back to that discussion. La réunion du G7 sera une bonne occasion de réaffirmer nos engagements et d'aller encore plus loin. Au G7, nous discuterons également de l'impact économique de la crise de la COVID-19, en particulier pour certains des pays les plus pauvres de la planète. Parce que notre reprise doit fonctionner pour tous. Selon les Nations Unies, à l'heure actuelle, plus de 34 millions de personnes sont au bord de la famine. Nous devons renforcer les systèmes alimentaires mondiaux. Et c'est pourquoi l'Union européenne, lors du G7, s'engagera à octroyer une nouvelle aide humanitaire de 250 millions d'euros pour lutter contre la faim. Par exemple, nous voulons donner presque 50 millions d'euros aux pays de la région du Sahel et de l'Afrique de l'Est. Les régions dures ont touché par les conséquences économiques de la pandémie et par le changement climatique. C'est-à-dire les sécheresses, les inondations, les conditions météorologiques extrêmes. Nous connaissons tous le phénomène. Le changement climatique a lieu. Et la science ne laisse aucun doute. Il n'y a pas de temps à perdre. Et c'est pourquoi, malgré la pandémie, l'Europe choisit d'accélérer la transition écologique en adoptant un plan de relance durable. Parce que même un réchauffement planétaire ramené à 1,5 degré aurait de graves incidences, en particulier dans des régions les moins développées du monde. And this is why now words must be followed by tangible action across all sectors of our economies and our societies. You know that we're going to present the Fit for 55 package in mid-July. And I'm glad that at the special meeting of the European Council at the end of May, heads of state and government in the first discussion of the overall package showed broad support. Because Europe wants to lead the way in this transition towards an economy that gives more to the planet than it takes away. Now, we want to broker the same ambition at global level. Clear commitments followed by equally clear action. In particular, an alignment with the G7 and the United States in the G7 would be very welcome, and it's time to do that now. And with the US, we will not only grow our common trade and investment relationship in support of the green and the digital transition of our economies. Together, we will also engage with our international partners for shared commitment and joint action to reduce emissions by 2030 and to have tangible goals to become climate-neutral economies by 2050. And in this way, we hope and we work for achieving the most ambitious possible outcome at COP26 in Glasgow and at the Biodiversity COP15 in Kunming. Honourable members, this is the ambition we want to bring to the table when we meet with our partners and friends from all over the world. I know that you, the European Parliament, share this ambition because we all want to end this pandemic and we all want to leave a healthy planet to future generations. Long live Europe. Thank you.
Grazie Presidente von der Leyen. Adesso ascoltiamo i gruppi politici. Presidente Weber, per il Partito Popolare.
The heads of the groups now. First of all, with Manfred Weber from the EPP. You have the floor, please, Mr. Weber.
President Sassoli, President Michel, President von der Leyen, dear colleagues. First of all, let me express it's a good feeling to be back here in Strasbourg. For me, it is a symbol of coming back to normal. I think that's the atmosphere all over Europe, that people feel we have a chance to come back to the old normal in a new world. And I only want to add in the debate about COVID and management of the crisis one point. In the daily life of our citizens, I think this week's decision on the certificate is important, because people have the chance also to win freedom of movement back, especially in front of the summer season. And that I want to see now a strong competition among our member states, who is first in implementing now what is currently on the table and what we approved this week. This European Council meeting was a positive one. And I even would say I was proud about the outcome, because it was a strong, it was a firm, tough, united response. Yes, this was a modern form of state terrorism, an EU internal flight from Athens to Vilnius, new level of escalation from Belarus, attack against us as Europeans. I think the big game changer was that people felt and saw that I'm affected, I'm concerned. Europeans were in the hands of a Belarusian dictator. That was the reality. And that's why, again, President Michel, this was a moment of geopolitical strength, of a strong signal from the European Council, and I want to thank you for this. Now it's about the implementation, to ban the flights, strict travel limitation of the elites, and Lukashenko must know that he must be held accountable for what he did. So an international tribunal is waiting for Mr. Lukashenko. That must be the message. We all know that there is a bigger question behind, that's the question about Russia, about the system of Vladimir Putin. The idea to stop the spreading of freedom and democracy further to the east is in his mind. That is the question he's dealing with. 35 years ago, it was Dresden, it was Budapest. 12 years ago, it was Kiev. Today, it's Minsk, and tomorrow, probably Moscow. That's the question which is on the table. And for us, as Europeans, one thing must be clear. Freedom fighters, especially those on European territory, must feel that we are on their side. We have a role to play in defending and promoting the European way of life, and that is the key message for us. But are we really capable to do so? Is the European way of life, the voice, really understood on global level? On the Belarus case, it worked because it was so obvious. But already on Russia, President Michel, you told us that there is still a discussion going on. Are we capable to keep Europe together? Question mark. And on China, when it is about Hong Kong, about the Uyghurs, do we have a voice as Europeans? I don't see it. I don't see it. And that's why I was surprised, let me be very frank, that I listened and read in the last days that you, President Michel, said publicly you have no opinion whether we should switch to the qualified majority-making decision process on foreign affairs. I tell you, I have a clear opinion. I think it's better to vote with qualified majority-making decision than to be silent and have no European voice. And that's why I think we have to use the future of Europe discussion to do the necessary steps now in making Europe much stronger than it is the case today. I also want to pick up on the climate debate as a second issue. We have a strong message with our 55% target for 2030. I want to underline in preparation now for the Fit for 55 package only two guiding principles which are for my group important. The first is that when we know now that and when we are aware that travelling and housing will be two issues where we have to focus in the reduction of CO2, and when we increase costs with a modern ETS system, then it arrives in the pocket of our citizens. It will be very close to our citizens. And I want to underline, having the French experience with the Yellow Vest movement in mind, we must keep the social dimension in our mind. We must be aware that this is a big challenge to balance things with the social dimension for the poor part of our society. And the second reflection I want to make is, yes, the border adjustment tax is probably a solution to avoid an unfair competition inside of the single market. But what is with the rest of the world? Our industry exports a lot of products to the rest of the world. We are a trading continent, and we profit a lot from this. And that's why I think we have to consider that to increase the costs for our European productions will also harm the competitiveness of our industry. And the EPP will never support a strategy which will finally lead us to a deindustrialization of the European Union. We must create jobs with the climate targets and not destroy jobs. 2 points in the preparatory process for the climate package, but overall in having G7 and the US summit in mind, let's show the world that we are leading, let's show the world that we are ambitious. Thank you so much.
Grazie Manfred. Per il gruppo dei Socialisti e Democratici, la Presidente García Pérez.
President García Pérez, you have the floor, Madam Pérez.
A te,
García Pérez.
Gracias, presidente. Señorías, un año y medio después de la última sesión que celebramos en Estrasburgo, estamos por fin de vuelta. Y esa es una buena señal, porque es un paso más hacia la normalidad que tanto ansiamos. Ha sido un año y medio muy difícil. No olvidamos a los fallecidos, ni la incertidumbre en la que se enfrentan tantas y tantas personas. Si al inicio la respuesta europea fue lenta y desorganizada, creo que a día de hoy podemos decir que muchos errores se subsanaron y que este verano vamos a iniciar una nueva etapa con optimismo, gracias en gran medida a la campaña europea de vacunación que está funcionando con un objetivo muy claro. Recuerdo que el año pasado, cuando estábamos en el pico de la emergencia sanitaria, había quien consideraba en esta Cámara que era el momento de poner en marcha comisiones de investigación y evidentemente era una posición respetable, pero nuestro grupo de socialistas y demócratas no apoyó en ese momento esa idea. No era nuestra postura. En medio de la tormenta era el momento de arrimar el hombro y de remar todos y todas en la misma dirección. Los socialistas y demócratas hemos querido ser constructivos, leales y responsables con la Comisión y con el Consejo, pero sobre todo con la ciudadanía, porque solo la cooperación institucional nos iba a sacar adelante. Pero ahora la situación es otra. La emergencia ha quedado atrás. El horizonte se va despejando. Y ahora sí, ahora es el momento de poder echar la vista atrás y aprender y mejorar. No para buscar culpables, no para señalar a nadie, sino para evaluar qué ha hecho la Unión Europea en su conjunto, qué instrumentos debemos fortalecer para estar mejor preparados ante una nueva crisis y qué otras capacidades tenemos que desarrollar. Creo que ha llegado un momento en el que en este Parlamento podamos crear un tipo de comisión especial para ver qué lecciones aprender frente a la pandemia. Esta comisión debe de abordar todas las dimensiones de la crisis, desde la salud a la investigación, desde el impacto económico y social a la libre circulación de los ciudadanos. Y ahora que ha pasado lo peor, es también el momento de continuar con las acciones legales contra aquellas farmacéuticas que no han cumplido y no están cumpliendo los contratos. El esfuerzo colectivo no ha terminado y tenemos que seguir trabajando en el ámbito económico para implementar el plan de recuperación, en el ámbito global para garantizar que las vacunas llegan a todos los rincones del mundo, en el sanitario, en el social, en el del fortalecimiento de nuestro estado de bienestar. Por un lado, las instituciones tenemos que hacer ese ejercicio de análisis sobre nuestras políticas y actuaciones. Y por otro, tenemos la gran oportunidad de debatir sobre las posibles reformas. La ciudadanía confiará en nosotros si ven que somos capaces de aprender, de no malgastar el tiempo enfrentándonos unos a otros que pensamos diferentes, sino de abordar las soluciones de manera conjunta, de dar una respuesta a la ciudadanía. Si lo hacemos, los hombres y mujeres de Europa podrán volver a confiar en el proyecto europeo. Muchas gracias.
Grazie Irace. Adesso per il gruppo Renew, Presidente Cioloş. Ne approfitto mentre puliscono il pulpito per informarvi che ieri sera al registro delle firme dei deputati sono presenti a Strasburgo 356 parlamentari. Questo è molto importante. Molti naturalmente lavorano dai loro uffici in remoto, come giusto, anche per mantenere il senso della prudenza che abbiamo consigliato. Prego, Presidente Cioloş.
MEP presence here in Strasbourg. Thank you very much. Mr. Cioloş.
președinte al Consiliului European, doamnă președintă a Comisiei Europene, dragi colegi, ne întoarcem încet spre normalitate și dovada este că suntem din nou astăzi aici la Strasbourg. Provocările însă cu care ne confruntăm împreună se înmulțesc în fiecare zi. Și doar dacă o să acționăm uniți, Uniunea Europeană își poate găsi calea pentru a-și proteja cetățenii, pentru a-și consolida influența globală și pentru a apăra democrația. În timpul ultimului Consiliu European exact asta s-a petrecut. O acțiune fermă și determinată și vă mulțumesc, domnule președinte, pentru asta. Pentru că introducerea rapidă a sancțiunilor în urma a ceea ce putem numi un act de terorism de stat din partea lui Lukashenko a trimis un semnal puternic. Că suntem pregătiți să ne apărăm valorile și să acționăm rapid și decis. Dar nu trebuie să ne oprim aici, pentru că Roman Protasevich este încă reținut, iar demnitatea și dreptul său la liberă exprimare continuă să-i fie refuzate. E nevoie și de sancțiuni economice și financiare, pentru că nu putem continua să susținem financiar prin orice mijloc acest regim în Belarus ca și cum nimic nu s-ar fi întâmplat. Un alt exemplu este certificatul digital comun COVID-19 al Uniunii, care este un instrument necesar pentru deplasările în condiții de siguranță în interiorul Uniunii Europene. Asta ajută milioane de europeni, nu doar pentru turiști, dar mai ales pe cei care trec zilnic granițele pentru munca lor, pentru activitatea lor profesională și pentru cei care au așteptat cu răbdare mai bine de un an de zile în timpul acestei lungi pandemii să călătorească pentru a-i vedea pe cei dragi. Ne așteptăm, deci, ca statele membre să pună în aplicare acest certificat, așa cum a fost decis de legislator la nivel european, și să o facă în mod responsabil, comun, să nu adauge alte reguli administrative care i-ar submina eficacitatea. Cetățenii trebuie să aibă acces ușor la certificat și să înțeleagă cum funcționează pentru a le disipa temerile și îndoierile asupra acestui document. Atunci când am strâns rândurile și am lucrat împreună în momente de criză, Uniunea a demonstrat că poate oferi rapid cetățenilor instrumente palpabile care să-i ajute. Nu în ultimul rând, schimbările climatice rămân una dintre cele mai urgente și importante provocări ale mandatului nostru. Uniunea Europeană e hotărâtă să facă tranziția către neutralitatea climatică și să facă din asta o poveste de succes, așa cum a spus doamna președintă a Comisiei Europene, să asigure o creștere economică durabilă, cercetare și inovare industrială verde și oportunități de locuri de muncă pentru cetățenii noștri. Nu trebuie să uităm asta, că această adaptare la schimbările climatice înseamnă și locuri de muncă. Oamenii, familiile și antreprenoriatul trebuie să stea în centrul acestei tranziții și scopul este de a ne asuma responsabilitatea pentru ceea ce rămâne pentru generațiile viitoare. Pachetul Fit for 2030, pregătit pentru 2030, ar trebui să stabilească cadrul pentru această transformare și ar trebui să se bazeze pe legislația climatică și energetică existentă, dar asigurându-se totodată că oamenii, precum și companiile, întreprinderile, sunt parte a tranziției și o susțin. Și doar în felul acesta, această tranziție poate fi un succes. Dragi colegi, transformările la care ne obligă criza prin care trecem pot crea diviziuni între noi. Dar dacă vedem ieșirea din criză ca pe o oportunitate, acesta poate fi un salt pentru proiectul european, un salt la care nici nu ne gândeam probabil în urmă cu un an și ceva când această criză a izbucnit. Vă mulțumesc.
Grazie Dacian. Presidente Keller, il gruppo dei Verdi.
From the Greens, you have the floor.
Prego. Buongiorno, Ska.
Good morning, Ska.
Dear colleagues, let's start with the positive news from last summit. There was indeed a unified and strong condemnation of Belarus kidnapping a plane for arresting and torturing two of its citizens. It's good that sanctions were agreed. It's good that they came swiftly. It was a truly outrageous action by Lukashenko, and it cannot go unanswered. And the EU must be ready to think about further sanctions and to work tirelessly for the release of all political prisoners. We must also step up our support to independent civil society, journalists and peaceful political actors in Belarus, and ensure that those fighting and risking their lives for democracy find support and protection in the European Union. The less good news is actually old news. The Council continues, unfortunately, to ignore the climate urgency and once again fell far short of agreeing anything close to the scale of action needed to protect our climate. It is ironic that the Council is welcoming the United States' commitment to the Paris Agreement and urges for increased global action, while at the same time it's stepping on the brake on climate targets and on concrete measures. I'm sure there were a lot of preoccupations. I'm sure not many of them were about the climate urgency. We expect more and better of you. Going into the COP26 in Glasgow, if the EU is to have any credibility and leverage to demand more climate action globally, the level of commitment from the EU side needs to be significantly stepped up. The Council has also debated the situation of the pandemic. And in Europe, the numbers indeed look promising and the vaccination efforts are finally picking up. And that's great, although we should not forget that there's also a significant difference still between members in their vaccination campaigns. But however well we might be doing in Europe, we should never forget that many countries globally hardly have any access to vaccines. And this is a new gap in global justice, threatening the lives and destroying the livelihoods of many, while also leaving the door open to any variant that can bring new spirals of problems worldwide. So the slogan of "no one is safe until everyone is safe" finally needs to be filled with life. And donations of financial means and vaccines are extremely welcome, but they're also not enough. Production needs to be ramped up. And one tool to bring this forward is a temporary TRIPS waiver, compulsory licensing for countries of the Global South and knowledge sharing that will boost global vaccine production. I think the EU must finally walk its talk and provide global leadership in all of those fields, and the G7 summit will be one possibility for that. Beyond the nice speeches, the EU must do more. It's what the world expects of the EU, but it's also what Europeans expect of their leaders, and that's what we will be holding you accountable of. Thank you very much.
Grazie Presidente Keller.
Thank you very much, President
Adesso l'onorevole Bizzotto per il gruppo di ID.
For the ID group, colleague Bizzotto. Colleague Bizzotto, you have the floor.
Grazie Presidente. L'Italia non è e non diventerà mai il campo proficuo d'Europa. Gli italiani non vogliono, non possono accogliere migliaia e migliaia di immigrati legali. Il Consiglio europeo non ha scritto una riga nelle sue conclusioni sull'emergenza clandestini che sta investendo l'Italia. Zero parole, zero impegni, zero azioni concrete. Nisma, nada, niente di niente. Alla faccia della tanto sbandierata solidarietà europea. È scandaloso che ancora una volta l'Europa lasci l'Italia completamente sola nella gestione di ondate migratorie sempre più massicce. Da inizio anno sono sbarcati in Italia oltre 15.000 immigrati clandestini.
50,000 people have arrived this year, clandestine migrants, illegal migrants. And it is only thanks to Salvini that we were able to reduce this particular figure in the months when he was in power to 2,000. So, indeed, we're speaking about a terrible problem. Italy ought to be supported.
E Malta,
Spain,
tutti i paesi
Denmark,
con governi
and
socialisti di sinistra
Malta,
che chiudono i porti, blindano le frontiere e rimandano indietro i clandestini. Perché le socialiste Spagna, Danimarca e Malta lo possono fare con tanto di applausi da Bruxelles e l'Italia no?
Other countries are able to do whatever they like to do on this particular front, but Italy is blocked and is not able to do anything. Why do those countries have the right to expel 5,000 per day and we cannot expel these individuals? So, indeed, it all comes down to Brussels and the various impediments that have been set up and creating a situation where migrants enter the country simply freely. Thank you very much.
Prego, Beate. Per il gruppo ICR.
Beate, and now for the ECR group, colleague Szydło. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President. President of the Commission, honourable members, I'm going to be focusing on three key issues. These issues were discussed at the last European Council. Firstly, COVID-19. We're all pleased to see that the situation has stabilized. We're pleased to be able to meet together here in Strasbourg, sending out a strong message to Europeans that we're winning the fight against the pandemic. And it's particularly important for citizens to feel and hope that they can get back to normality. And vaccinations are going to be key to that. It's important for citizens to feel that they want to be vaccinated. Vaccination campaigns in some member states are going well. Vaccine deliveries are working better in some countries than in others, but broadly speaking, the situation has stabilized. It's very important for us not to underestimate the possibility of a new wave starting, and so it's key to focus on vaccines to prevent that. We need to ensure that there are growing numbers of vaccines. We need to ensure that more and more people wish to be vaccinated, and may I draw your attention to the fact that we need to focus first and foremost on that vaccination campaign, working with those who have questions about the vaccine, who are not sure. Secondly, the climate. I wish to say that it's important for us to have such ambitious aims. All the member states have got on board with this programme. But most of all, we need to keep in mind that there are member states who are going to require more time due to the specific situation of their economies, or else they're not going to be able to achieve those aims. I'm thinking of countries in Central Europe such as Poland. The majority of our energy comes from coal, and that means we're going to be needing more time for the transition. Now, I have gone over my time, but let me be brief on my next point, our policy with regard to Belarus and Russia. On a number of occasions, Poland warned that we would have to take a stand, take a clear stand with a firm policy in the face of this regime. There are a whole range of statements coming out, and of course we support the democratic opposition, but at the same time, we're still investing in projects like Nord Stream 2.
Grazie.
We need to be clear in our positions.
Presidente Aubry.
Thank you very much, Beate. Now, President Aubry from the left. You have the floor, Madam Aubry.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Madame von der Leyen, Monsieur Michel.
Mr. Michel.
Partout sur notre continent et au-delà, les autoritarismes se renforcent et la démocratie vacille. L'acte de piraterie de Loukachenko à l'encontre d'un opposant et sa compagne est la dernière alerte d'une tendance profondément inquiétante. L'Union européenne a heureusement condamné l'attitude du régime biélorusse et pris des sanctions, bien qu'insuffisantes. Car face aux remises en cause de l'état de droit, aucun atermoiement n'est acceptable. Il serait temps d'afficher une même fermeté face à la propagation sans précédent des idéologies autoritaristes, liberticides et haineuses au sein même de l'Union européenne. En Hongrie, Orban remet en cause la justice et cherche à s'attribuer les pleins pouvoirs. En Pologne, le PiS harcèle les personnes LGBTI et veut interdire l'avortement. En Autriche, le gouvernement établit un fichage de la communauté musulmane. En Slovénie, un Premier ministre fasciné par Trump veut censurer la presse et les partis d'opposition. En Espagne, nos amis de Podemos reçoivent des menaces de mort de l'extrême droite et des balles à leur domicile. Dans mon propre pays, en France, celui des droits de l'homme, le gouvernement fait voter des lois de stigmatisation des musulmans et d'impunité des violences policières. En France, toujours, le président se fait agresser par un adepte de la fachosphère et un youtubeur d'extrême droite met en scène le meurtre abject et glaçant des électeurs de Jean-Luc Mélenchon. L'extrême droite progresse dans l'ensemble des pays européens et son agenda raciste, sexiste, homophobe et liberticide commence déjà à être mis en œuvre. Partout, le péril fasciste monte et les digues sautent. Et vous laissez faire. Ce silence n'est pas seulement lâche, il est complice. Cette inaction n'est pas seulement regrettable, elle est coupable. Les fondements même de nos démocraties sont remis en cause et vous préférez détourner le regard. Car comme dans l'histoire, certains préféreront toujours Hitler que le Front populaire. Alors, je lance ici une alerte solennelle depuis le Parlement européen. Réagissez. Souvenez-vous de ces mots du pasteur Niemeyer. Quand les nazis sont venus chercher les communistes, je n'ai rien dit, je n'étais pas communiste. Quand ils ont enfermé les sociaux-démocrates, je n'ai rien dit, je n'étais pas social-démocrate. Quand ils sont venus chercher les syndicalistes, je n'ai rien dit, je n'étais pas syndicaliste. Quand ils sont venus me chercher, il ne restait plus personne pour protester. Alors, réveillez-vous avant que plus personne ne soit en mesure de protester.
Onorevole Giarrusso, non iscritti, un minuto.
For 1 minute, please.
Presidente, Commissari, ancora una volta nell'ultimo Consiglio europeo l'Europa ha messo la testa sotto la sabbia, preferendo non affrontare il tema immigrati. Grazie all'iniziativa dell'Italia è stato inserito un punto all'ordine del giorno al prossimo Consiglio ed è bene che se ne parli, ma non basta. Bisogna agire. Da decenni l'Europa discute, si interroga e si divide su come affrontare il tema del secolo e lo scandalo assoluto che ne segue. Migliaia di uomini, donne e bambini morti ogni anno nel mar Mediterraneo a pochi chilometri dalle bellissime coste della mia Sicilia. La soluzione c'è già e si chiama solidarietà ed è scritta nella Carta dei nostri trattati, ma non nella realtà, diciamolo chiaramente. Il criterio del paese di primo ingresso è uno schiaffo al principio di solidarietà fra Stati e va tolto subito. Non solo l'Italia ma tutti gli Stati membri devono affrontare insieme il fenomeno dell'immigrazione, dunque più mezzi, più soldi, più uomini, misure incisive contro il business del traffico di esseri umani e ricollocamento automatico ed obbligatorio dei richiedenti asilo. Il prossimo Consiglio europeo non si trasformi nell'ennesima sterile tavola rotonda in cui tutti parlano ma nessuno decide niente. Servono fatti concreti. Dimostriamo coi fatti che l'Europa può cambiare.
Necessary to work concertedly.